Hi, let's go through the setup process for the financial workbook. When you go to the financial workbook, all of the setup occurs on a config tab. So I'm going to go over to the config tab, take a look, and right at the top you'll see workbook configuration, and there's a section initial setup and configuration. There's a list of instructions here that basically go through the fact that what you're going to be doing is going into a setup workbook and bringing in the connection setup string. And the connection setup has you enter in a server, our database server name, the database name, the user ID, and the password, which are credentials to the report data warehouse that we have here at Autotask that you will actually be downloading data to the workbook from. So one of the things you'll see here is this information right here is filled in. Now this could be filled in for a couple of reasons. It may have been that you've previously configured the workbook with your own credentials and then they would appear here. But one of the things that we've introduced into the financial workbook, and as we do updates to the previous workbooks, you'll be seeing this as well, it was also in the client workbook, is this is actually coming in from a setup file that if it exists in the same directory with the workbook that you're configuring, it's called WB setup for workbook setup, it's a text file. It actually has the name of the server and the database and the user ID, and it gets it from this file. And the reason we did this was that, although people typically remember their password, we didn't want them to have to be looking this up when we send out updates. If they create this WB setup file in the directory of their workbooks, anytime they go into a setup and run the setup process, these would be defaulted in. So that's why we're seeing them in the actual workbook on this screen here. You also will have to, in terms of notification, put in a password. I'm going to insert in the password here. We've actually masked it to keep it non-visible. And there are two fields I'll talk about more extensively about how to set it up in a next video. But there are advanced where clauses. And the advanced where clauses allow you to restrict the information that downloads into a workbook. It may be that you only want to bring in the revenue and the costs for, you may want to exclude out a certain contract type, or you may want to bring in a certain list of accounts. Or for resources, it may be that you want to restrict and only have certain resources in terms of their resource hours. So this will really kind of let you restrict the information that appears in the workbook, and the example of the syntax and stuff like that will be in a separate video, but I wanted to let you know how that operates. What we also introduced in the configuration setup for the financial workbook is the ability of saving a password through a checkbox. So you no longer have to go in and actually modify the data connections. You can say save password here, and there's a note here that says that it's a warning that says if you choose to save a password, they are visible in clear text if you go into data connections. So although you won't have to re-enter in your password every time you do a refresh, and it makes refreshing a lot easier, there is a point to note about security. And so when we say that people save their passwords locally, we also advise that they protect their workbook, the overall workbook, so you have to enter a password when you get into the workbook, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But in terms of the process, this is really what you do in terms of setup. So you get a blank workbook, you enter in your credentials, and you say next step. And what this does is this goes out and it gets the revenue and cost information for the site. It gets your resource hours, it gets your resource rates, it gets revenue and cost by a per client basis, and then it does all the data analysis. And really, this workbook is now set up and configured. Primarily, in terms of this workbook, less than some others, is that the primary thing that this workbook is doing in terms of updating specific data analysis is it is getting specific people so that you can get labor detail. So you can kind of see is that what it was, very specific in terms of the configuration is we'll update the labor detail for the individuals. Why would you want to go through and do another setup of a workbook? If you bring on additional people, what this will do is this will add those people onto the labor tab. One of the things that you probably should know about is that there's a criteria button here, and the criteria button simply allows you to put in the name of the person. So I could manually enter. In fact, I'll show you. I'm just going to copy this person's name. That's actually my name, and copy it into the next resource. And by simply having the data appear in the criteria column, actually, I'm just going to say shift paste. Copy that, and I will paste it in here. One of the things you see is that automatically all the data in the analysis fills in, and I see Joe Rourke again. But imagine someone imagine what happened was John Smith started in my company, and there isn't a John Smith, but I'll just type in John Smith. I could just type in a person, and then John Smith, when they had labor hours and stuff like that, would then be appearing and aggregating for the data. So I can do that manually. I could also go in and just rerun the workbook setup program, and it would actually download the people and put them into the tab. What this also did was it got my data so that once I do this, I can go over and start taking a look at all my financial trends, because you'll have the data that's associated to it. Because I indicated that I wanted to save the password, I won't have to enter in the password. Each time I go in and I do a click on a refresh, I won't have to enter in a password again. It will simply run with the saved information. So that's kind of great. When you save the password, I do recommend going and saying File, and then using the Protect Workbook choice and saying Encrypt with Password. This allows you to put in a password which is encrypted within your workbook, that each time you open up that workbook, you will have to enter in that password. And as it says, it's advisable to keep the list of passwords. It cannot be recovered, even though there probably are some tools out there that it will try to hack into a workbook. But this basically makes the workbook more secure. If it happens not to be on maybe a SharePoint server that has the file protected, or if it is on your local computer and you're concerned about people having access to it. So you can use that, and certainly because, like I said, on the data connections side, you will be able to see that the password on the connection. And really, in terms of the workbook setup, that's all there is in terms of setting up the workbook and starting to use it. I will go through in the next video, set up a currency and fiscal month and the company name, and then we have another one that goes through the specifics of the advanced where clause that you can change at any time. So thank you very much.